Hi, I'm Elliot Marsh. Today we go deep into the furnace where Led Zeppelin hammered out one of the most sprawling, strange, and honestly awe-inspiring double albums in rock history, Physical Graffiti. We're going to trace how a band already at the summit of the world decided not to play it safe, how a crumbling country house became a studio, how old tapes and new experiments were stitched together, and why that big, battered gatefold still feels like you've stepped into another city. Ready? Let's go. First, set the scene. It's 1973-74. Zeppelin have just come off huge tours and the success of Houses of the Holy. They're not a hungry upstart anymore. They're the band stadium promoters call when they need to sell out a continent. But with that size comes freedom and pressure. They formed their own label, Swan Song, which meant more control, more choices, and fewer people saying no. So the idea of a double album, a musical statement with room to roam, starts to make sense. They wanted to be both ambitious and unapologetic. By the way, the project didn't spring fully formed. It began as a more modest plan, a single album maybe. But Jimmy Page was sitting on a backlog of astonishing outtakes from previous sessions. The band kept writing, and the material refused to be pigeonholed. They could be heavy, tender, funky, Eastern, all within the same record. So instead of cutting things down, they made a space big enough to hold the mess and the magic. Listen, Headley Grange deserves its own paragraph. This old, slightly falling apart country house in Hampshire had been a refuge for the band before, and it had a sound. Picture it, stairwell that makes a drum sound cavernous, rooms full of furniture you didn't flinch at, a Rolling Stones mobile truck parked outside, cables snaking through corridors like vines. They set up gear where it fit and recorded the band living and working in the same place. The result? Performances that breathe. They weren't in a sterile studio, they were in a lived-in house, and that ambience went straight into the grooves. There's a story, you know it, about John Bonham's drums being recorded in the stairwell. That booming, natural reverb on tracks like When the Levee Breaks from earlier records is a precedent for what Page chased here. A big, organic drum sound that feels like a building hit back. On Physical Graffiti, Page was producer, and engineers like Andy Johns were implementing those live room sensibilities with mobile gear. He wanted everything to feel massive but real. Okay, let's talk songs. We can't do every track, but we can peel back several to see the process. Start with Kashmir. That riff, it's hypnotic, serpentine. Page's guitar figure locks into a kind of modal drone. Bonham gives it a marching, relentless pulse, and John Paul Jones weaves orchestral colours beneath it. Plant's lyrics wander into myth and landscape. It's almost cinematic. Kashmir is East meets West, not just a motif, but a production philosophy. Layered, repetitive, gradually swelling until it becomes ritual. Trampled underfoot, funky. Yeah, Zeppelin go deep into American groove here. That clavinet, courtesy of John Paul Jones, pulls the song into a tighter, sweatier pocket. It's 70s soul through a British hard rock filter. The band loved that hybridity. One moment you're in a sweatbox club, the next you're in a desert procession. And then there's In My Time of Dying. This is the song that feels like an odyssey. It's a blues at its core, but they stretched it out, let the slide guitars breathe, and captured improvisation that sounds like lightning in a bottle. Page's slide work, the way Plant's voice can go from prayer to howl, it's primal. Recording these long, immersive takes in Headley Grange helped preserve the rawness. They didn't choke the life out of it with over-precision. 10 Years Gone and In the Light show the other side of the record, sophisticated arranging and texture. 10 Years Gone is heartbreaking, layered with guitars overdubbed in sympathetic harmonies. You can practically feel the rooms where Page sat, stacking parts. In the Light opens like a sunrise, synth and bowed guitar textures, unusual forms of dynamics. These tracks show a maturing band that's comfortable with subtlety as well as must. We should pause and say this. A lot of the magic here is experimentation, not just in what instruments they used, but in how they used space and tape. Page would layer multiple guitar parts, sometimes dozens, to create those cathedral-like walls. Jones would add clavinet, mellotronish strings, or synth textures where needed. Bonham, of course, anchored everything. The band balanced tightness with a willingness to let tracks breathe, to leave the odd hiccup, the sudden breathing room, and that gave the album a human heartbeat. Now, the curatorial act, this is what turned Physical Graffiti from a sprawling attic dump into a coherent 2 LP journey. Page and the band went back through earlier sessions and pulled out tracks that have been passed over for reasons of flow or label constraints. Songs like The Rover and Down by the Seaside, strong pieces that didn't fit the previous album's arcs, suddenly found their place. The band wasn't just releasing leftovers, they were assembling a mosaic. It's important, this was intentional, choosing order, pacing, the balance between heavy and soft, between long epics and punchy grooves. Smart. Also, think about the timing. By making it a double album, Zeppelin essentially gave themselves an oral city, neighborhoods of sound. You could drop the needle in on side 2 and land in funk. Flip it and you're in a blues epistle. Another side and it's orchestral rock. That eclecticism encouraged listeners to commit. You had to spend time with it. It wasn't background music. Let's talk visuals for a minute. Physical Graffiti's cover is itself a piece of theatre. An old New York tenement, die-cut windows, inner sleeves with interchangeable photos. You could rearrange the faces in the windows and make the package your own little cityscape. The title, Physical Graffiti, works on multiple levels. It reads like a claim. This music is their mark on the physical world. It's gritty, urban, and a touch playful. The packaging made the album feel like an artifact you wanted to hold and explore. Short aside, remember when album art mattered? This was that era. When Physical Graffiti landed in 1975, it didn't so much arrive as it made a statement. Sales were huge, the record shot up the charts, but reception was mixed in print at first. Some critics tired of Zeppelin's excess, others recognized the craft, the ambition. For fans, it largely reaffirmed what anyone who'd seen them live already believed. This was a band that could be everything at once and still sound like themselves. And what's the legacy? The double album became a template. Big, eclectic, fearless. You can trace the DNA of Physical Graffiti into hard rock and early metal, into alternative bands that later embraced both heaviness and textual experimentation. More than that, even 40, 50 years on, the record reads like a world. Every listen reveals a new corner, a new overdub, a different shade in the mix. It's colossal and intimate at once. A tiny story. I was in a record shop years ago and found a copy with handwritten notes inside the sleeve. Nothing historic, just a fan's scrawl about the first time they heard Kashmir live. That's the thing. This album has kept personal histories. People fold their lives into it. That's how you tell the work was more than a transaction. Before we wrap, a quick technical note for the gearheads in the room. Page's guitars were often Les Pauls through Marshall stacks, but he also used 12 strings, acoustic layering, and bowed parts to stretch timbers. Jones moved from bass to keyboards to clavinet to everything in between, acting as the band's textural Swiss Army knife. Bonham's bass drum and snare machine provided the gravitational center. And Page as producer? He had an ear for epic collisions, natural room sound, tape saturation, and careful overdub architecture. And Bonham as producer, he had an ear for epic collisions, natural room sound, tape saturation, and careful overdub architecture. Short, sharp. It's messy. It's gorgeous. It's Zeppelin. So what makes Physical Graffiti still worth our time? It's the confidence of a band at the top of their powers, willing to be messy, eclectic, and bold. It's the house that gave them space to breathe. It's the curation that turned disparate moments into an experience. It's the cover that made it an object, and it's the songs that keep revealing more. That combination, process, place, product, is why the album echoes in guitar riffs, in garage bands, in playlists, and in vinyl crates worldwide. Thanks for listening. If you're spinning Physical Graffiti tonight, let a side play through. Sit with the dynamics. Listen for the stairwell reverb, the squeated tape, the little overdub bits you didn't catch before. And if you've got a memory of this album, a first listen, a concert, a rainy night discovery, write in. I love hearing those stories. This is Elliot Marsh. Join me next time for another session tape from 30 years ago.